uh, the most, the highest response was the walkable downtown. And then,
Can I ask on that?
Yes.
Go back to the question.
Yeah.
So
I
remember,
don't get it. It's by YouTube was asking for verification.
the most, the highest response was, I'm famous, I'm on YouTube.
well, yeah, on the wording. I mean, it's still focusing on Commercial Street as the downtown and only
Yes.
Commercial Street as the downtown.
Well, yes, Commercial Street as the highlight, but I think the surrounding area is okay. Correct, not State Street, but the alley behind, 125, so that area.
Okay.
Is that good?
Keep going. I'll
Okay.
bring up my thoughts later.
Okay, the next question, what Commercial Street area ideas from the 3 different scenarios are you most excited about? Respondents like the trail on the north side, this idea of where that grass is going down, maybe we do some kind of trail there. We'll have to work with the railroad company. Outdoor dining, residents like that. Active area for gatherings and entertainment. And then also you'll see in here less, but people do like the idea of mixed use housing, mixed use buildings with housing opportunities, and that's also part of it. And then from there, pedestrian bridge across the railroad tracks. That would be very expensive, but potentially using that building. And then the bottom one down here, closing the State Street and Commercial Street intersection and developing a new access. So that's one that we're also still looking at. It's a very dangerous intersection, and really there's 2 options: industrial, and then also is that 375? Just across from where you grew up. That's the other option there. Okay. Want to just run through a couple of these. The city is considering alley behind Commercial Street to improve access and circulation. What is your preference for the alley concept? And then you'll see that the concept with outdoor dining, sidewalks, outdoor spaces, that was what respondents liked the most. I think it shows that people want a downtown, a Commercial Street where there's more things to do. There's not just 3 restaurants and ice cream, but maybe more, or there's activities, fun things to do, maybe some housing, some office, kind of a little bit more vibrant is what that says. Okay, this is an important question also as part of this survey. What new housing combination do you prefer? And select one. And then the one with 50% was walkable downtown scenario near Commercial Street, so the Commercial Street area. New buildings or remodels are encouraged to be vertical mixed-use buildings with housing above. Mobile home units would be relocated within the city, and the remaining area would be used for mixed use. We're not going to get into the mobile home part tonight, but we did have to ask that. And this wasn't saying the city wants to get rid of the mobile homes or whatever, but there is the question, is that the highest and best use for a downtown? Economically and planning, it's nothing against mobile homes, it's just the intensity of the use. So we asked the question, if that mobile home could go somewhere else in the city and be replaced with more of a mixed use, would you be okay with it?
So that's privately owned.
Correct.
You can't just say, okay, you're gonna move, right?
Correct. Yeah,
You have to be convinced to sell.
correct. It would be entirely, the city would say, we're okay with it, and we'll give the zoning to allow for it. And then it's up to the private sector to actually do it. And that's what we're doing with, most of the planning is allowing and promoting, but not necessarily, we're not going to be building that, but more in the residential area Now they may not want it there, right? So let's be honest, and they may not want it there. And maybe it could go in a neighborhood where you have a mixture of housing. Um, yeah, there we go. No, where there could be some single family, maybe some townhome and a limited number of mobile home. I just don't love, anytime you have a project that's a project, meaning it's just one type of housing or whatever, and especially if it's not super high end, then it tends to degrade over time. But if it could be blended in with a variety of housing types, not necessarily like a single family house and then a mobile home, but maybe within a development having some there. I don't know. It's a very delicate and difficult issue, but also uh, in Utah, there are not being built new mobile home parks. And the one here, I drove down it the other day, it looks pretty good. It's fairly well maintained, looks pretty good. But there are other ones throughout the state which did get, yeah, raised, dilapidated, and the city's role, I can think of one in Clearfield, was they just rezoned it. That's all they had. That was their responsibility, was just allow for a different zoning. And then the private community took care of that. And the city could potentially require that some housing, the same kind of housing or similar, be replaced somewhere else. That's a thoughtful, considerate thing to do. It is probably one of the most affordable places to live. And so that's something to keep in mind. But we're not focusing on that today.
You know, one thing on that, sorry to, and go to your next one, slide, because I think it kind of shows the way this works. And it goes along with all of our like trails and connectivity. I think one of the things that really comes up with Commercial Street being the downtown is access to Commercial Street. It's not the best walk, right? Like there, if you're asking me, like, I probably wouldn't walk down State Street to go over to Commercial Street.
Right.
So that leaves Trojan Boulevard. What's that street called?
Yeah.
125?
Yep.
Well, you leave 125 and it's okay. But you know, those are considerations if you want to make it more inviting. Like you can get to the park pretty well. And I think once you get to the park, I think those sidewalk sections down to Commercial Street, and I would say especially, I don't know, I haven't walked it most recently, but on the west side, you just want to improve that to be more inviting to get down there?
At one point, so that's all zoned commercial down 125. At one
Right.
point, the thinking was these houses are gonna convert to commercial over time and just haven't. Which I'd still like to see. I'd love that street to be almost the main shopping district almost. Just like 25th Street where you've got shops on both sides, then you come down, you have the railroad front, but it's kind of odd that our main street for commercial is only half a street as far as businesses go. Whereas most towns, I shouldn't say every town, most towns have it coming in like a T instead of parallel to the railroad. So, I mean, that's how it's zoned, but we've moved a couple of those to residential, like where the bowling alley next to it, where the car wash was, that was commercial. Now it's apartments, but I don't know. I mean, the marketplace just hasn't moved there.
Not yet. We're actually going to talk about that. It's knocking, actually. Okay, so this is from our general plan, our adopted general plan, and this is our future land use. The future land use is where do we want to be in the future? And go ahead. I think expand. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's not something that, I wish we would have talked 125 during the general plan, but it doesn't mean we can't focus on it. So the general plan does have commercial street, as a downtown mixed use. And that, sorry, it's really hard to read, but it's identified right here, downtown mixed use at 6 to 12 units, which is gross per acre. So the general plan does identify our downtown as mixed use. And I think that's very important and relevant that this is an adopted document. This has gone through the process.
So Jake, I don't know if you want to pull it up, but on our website has the interactive general plan
Oh,
on
okay.
it. It's,
Does-
it does show, it does show,
Let's
Um,
see, I think,
so see, go to that one. So it does show what everything in purple is mixed residential, mixed commercial.
yeah, okay,
Let's show it a little bit bigger on that.
yeah. Yeah, okay. It's interesting that they're different. It does.
Plan it, and I think we can chance where you're heading.
Right.
We're still.
There's a couple pads. Okay. I like that metaphor. Okay, so the general plan vision is for the downtown area, which is not just commercial street, to be more mixed use. Um, and, okay, here's our zoning. So the central commercial, which is what I particularly want to talk about tonight, is in yellow. And so just kind of get an idea there on that, and then we'll come back to that. Okay, here we go. And this is, I wish I could really zoom in. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this, looking at CC right here, see if this will let me do that. Okay. You'll notice we come down under permitted uses, and in the CC zone, really no commercial use or no residential use is permitted. We do have live work as a conditional use in the CG, and live work would be typically as a townhome, and the bottom floor is commercial, oftentimes an office or maybe a salon or that kind of use, and then the second floor or third floor is a residential use. But in the CC zone, which is just what we're talking about, we have none of the residential uses in terms of live work, mobile home, multifamily residential unit, secondary residential unit. That would be like maybe an ADU or just a smaller one, single family, two family, institutional. So,
So on that,
yeah,
because there is residential.
Sure.
ADU there now. So you're saying, remind me when it's not in, nothing is in there. What does that mean?
yeah, prohibited, but you would also say if it was correctly approved at the time it was approved, then you would say legal non-conforming. So at the time, it was legal what they did and getting it approved, and now it's non-conforming. So that,
When did this change? Let me, so
Sure.
specific examples, the old Rogers Foods grocery store, it's got units there that are Airbnb or apartments. Right next to the liquor store in the back has apartments.
yeah, there's a bunch.
But those were all prior to this ordinance, or it was changed?
I believe so. I asked Teresa for history.
Because those are pretty recent.
Ray?
Those are recent, and what they are is in the historic overlay, it talks about mixed use is encouraged, but it's only in the historic overlay, which is not all the commercial central area.
So, okay, so this, it doesn't, the commercial
It's just the
central.
zoning.
Talking orange apples and pineapples.
Yeah, we really are.
Yeah.
We haven't solidified an area yet. And they got 2 or 3 overlays already and some aren't, some
Yeah,
won't.
we have the two.
Okay,
And-
so just to be clear, then that's because of the historic overlay they're allowed there.
Right.
And the
Not
historic,
because of central commercial. Got it. Okay.
and the historic overlay says that they're allowed as a secondary use, meaning because it's behind, it's not out front. And also, I think it was more of a conditional type use where the planning commission or the city council approved that.
The old Rogers, so those are new. The ones behind the old Buzzies, they've been there forever. So yes and no, depending on which one you're talking.
And so we do have a little bit of history of some residential on Commercial Street. So in the past few months, we've had a number of potential developments that have come and talked to the city. And because they have not done an application and they have not requested to meet with the planning commission or anything like that, I don't want to get into specific projects. But there's actually been at least 3 in the central commercial that we've talked to over the last year, all of which have done architectural drawings. They put effort into it, some money, and wanting to do a mixed use building or mixed use type project in central commercial. They all 3 were actually good looking projects that would fit in very well in the city.
I'm guessing probably not Commercial Street.
2 of them are. There's those pads that are open, by the way, in front of the hotel, and then also.
If it's on
Down
Morgan
on-
Moms, does that make it public?
Oh,
Because it was.
well, they're,
The one landowners put it on Morgan Moms that they are going to put a 2-story commercial building on one of those pads
Hmm.
in front of the hotel.
yeah,
I consider Morgan Moms public.
yeah, if they put it on there, then
They can talk about it, but the city does not have a formal application, so we're not allowed to talk.
Understood.
yes.
Their
But-
application went through Morgan Moms.
And our discussion tonight is not project specific, but
Right.
more planning, something that could relate to that whole zone. And I think for the sake of what we're trying to do, we'll just focus on the CC zone. And so I bring that up because at least one of them is actually very serious and pending and has asked the city to do something about it to allow. They've brought in beautiful drawings, nice project. They're saying, we want to do this project, and we're saying, our code doesn't allow it.
So
But does a historic overlay allow what they want to do without us in this change?
The last one is not in the historic overlay, so I don't think that would,
That is an historic, on Commercial Street. Does our historic overlay allow what they want to do already?
Like Jeff Matthews, yes.
it would be a stretch, but I think so. Yeah, as a secondary. This would make it a little bit more formal.
Anyway, just wanted to put that out there. Seems like you didn't understand the historic overlay and it allows that already.
I know it does, like, it's just a little bit of a stretch. I'd rather make it more obvious.
Okay, and that's fine.
what is that use that we're looking to accommodate?
So what I'm proposing is actually allowing what I'm proposing is actually bringing in a new residential, a mixed use building. And so the mixed use would require commercial on the ground floor and then residential above, and then also residential behind. So that way we preserve the commercial corridor and the commercial use. And think about it as we're adding to the toolbox. We're not taking away. Now, also think about this as a step in the right direction. I see in 2025, where we're doing this downtown plan, I see more of a big code look at the downtown, and maybe we move some things around and all of that. But also where we have our general plan and this planning process, and we have developers knocking with the kind of project that the city may not want to turn away. I can't speak entirely on behalf, but based on what the general plan says and our planning, we don't necessarily want to stop the train and redo everything while we do that. Could we make a few changes?
Are we just making that more explicit? Or is it already a legal use?
We would be adding the use. We would add a mixed use.
Well, my question is, if someone came in today, they couldn't do that. I thought we had addressed a mixed use. Do we not ever finish that, a mixed use ordinance earlier?
We have our mixed residential one.
No, I'm not thinking mixed residential, no, the mixed use, this very thing we
Oh.
started talking about a while ago, but I.
With me?
Well, in these sessions.
Okay.
So the question is, right now they can't do it. We need
Correct.
To add that. specific-
Correct. Correct. And
I mean, so if the question is, do we want to give people more reasons to put businesses in? Like that, if that's really the question we're getting at, I mean, I think that's, you know, I guess, is that what we're getting at?
yeah,
If it is, then I think we're like, we have agreed, like, it's tough to get businesses as it is, so if that's working there, then it's a decision. You know, kind of makes it easier, unless we just don't want there to be a mixed use thing, but
Well, I like it. I think
Yeah.
it's consistent with what the survey showed too.
it is when we have two. We have the general plan and then we also have the recent survey. So I'm going to show you through a few examples of kind of what we're talking about. This one is from Bountiful.
are we allowed to do 3-story buildings?
The
More
building
density
height
yet?
is actually 40 feet.
What?
Was it,
40 feet is the building height limit in a central commercial. What's that?
Where at?
In the code.
The code is 32 or 35.
It's actually 40.
In the historic overlay is 35.
Yeah. it's-
In the
yeah.
commercial central, it's 40.
Yeah.
I thought it was 35, based on the fire.
So what's that translate
No.
to? Is a 35-foot building, a 3-story building,
Or potentially a 4.
it could be 4?
35 is only.
The fire department did get a new fire truck with a ladder to do that. That was, I don't know what year they bought it, but that was a restricting factor.
A limiting factor.
Yeah. But the
So
school
that-
is higher than that. I don't know the school height, but the high school.
So is 40 feet typical of a 3-story building?
Well, 40 is an well, it's not an odd number, but 40 is unusual because it's almost 4 stories if it's a flat roof, or 3 with a pitch plus some. But not, it almost would be better a little bit up. So let me show you some of these examples and we'll get, because height is part of this section. There's 3 things that we would have to change if we were going to allow a nice mixed use project to come in. But I want to show you this example. This is what we're talking about. Here you have 2 stories of residential above, you have commercial down below. I've been to this a number of times. It's Bountiful. It's always busy. It's very, to me, this is a good Morgan type project. Maybe the architecture is a little different or something, but 3, maybe 4 with a step back type of deal. And so there's that one. Here's another one. I don't know if we'll get all brick. That is expensive, but certainly nice. Again, you'll see the mixed use. And a couple things about it. The building is on the street, so it's nice and walkable on the sidewalk, and then the parking is behind. And there's another one with diagonal parking, and this one is gets up to 4. It's a tall first floor, and then maybe this background here would be considered that. So those were the ones I wanted to show. So as I've looked at the code, there's basically 3 things that we would need to look at to allow these kind of projects. The first would be a mixed use building. And like these examples we're looking at. And the second one is the code in the central commercial outside of the historic does allow 40. But the building height, I'm wondering if we look at maybe going up to 45 and then having a step back. This is a step back right here. This is a good example of a step back as well. So it feels like 3 stories at the street and the sidewalk, but then you have balconies on top or you have a step back.
Help me count the stories there. How many stories on the street?
So it's 2, but this is
see 2.
this is a tall,
I see 2 stories.
yeah,
I
yeah.
see the 3 you
That's the
said.
principle.
It's the principle. And
And
our code is in feet, not in stories,
On that
which
step
that's
back, how many stories in that setback?
1. It goes up 1 after
Okay,
the
so
step back.
There's only 3 in that set. There are 2 up front, 3 in the back.
Right,
Okay.
right. But this is the principle.
Okay.
And then the third thing that we would need to do to allow this is a shared parking component. That's, a lot of times these projects you'll have during the daytime, the commercial parking is in most demand. And then in evening, especially 7, 8 PM till the morning is residential. So allowing for a little bit of a shared parking. It's a good land use strategy because then you get the most out of your parking. And parking is something that I think most cities have a love-hate relationship with. You love parking because most of us drive cars, we do, but and it's also how, it's how we get around. But also the hate part is parking doesn't generate any revenue. It doesn't, there's nobody's paying just because of, especially where we don't charge for parking. And so having the right parking amount that's that Goldilocks rule that you really try to do. And that's where a shared parking, that some of the commercial and the residential can be shared. You require some specific guaranteed numbers for the residential units, and then for visitors and daytime use and all that, then it's shared. And then you don't have to have giant parking lots.
Everything specifically allow mixed use, building height and shared parking. those
Yeah.
are the 3.
Yeah, so I want to hear your thoughts on that. If you like this, we would come back with a draft ordinance next month and on these things. The thing about what I would put in there is that the mixed use does need to be on the street and it does need to be mixed use. So that way we're preserving that commercial up front on our streets. And then up above or behind can be residential. And I really think particularly on 125, that would be something that would start to enhance and change that corridor. And particularly, these are kind of some of the areas. Thoughts on that idea? I think it's something that we could do that would allow it and still preserve the commercial function of it and not have a dramatic change.
I don't mind the concept. The only thing in my mind, I have a problem visualizing how the parking house is going to work. I have a problem visualizing that in my mind, how there's enough space in any of those locations to have many apartments plus the commercial plus enough parking for all that.
Okay,
I have a problem seeing that yet.
yeah, okay.
I don't mind the concept if it can actually work on paper.
And with the parking, some of it could be what they call tuck under parking. So tuck under. So the building is, the back part of the building, not what you see from the street, but what's behind is up 1 level. And so you can drive under. That's a way to take advantage of the land. And then also the shared parking. And then also maybe more parking on the street in terms of just street parking for commercial uses.
Those are good concepts. But again, I take 125. There's not room on that street for on-street parking. The street's too narrow as it is. So on-street parking is great to throw that concept out, but I'm not sure it's going to work on 125.
And part of this, think about it as it's our job to create the rules that are safe and good and promote what the
right.
city's thinking. And then it's up to the developer and the architect to be creative on how to do that.
What street is that?
Yeah, I used to look at the front of it, you talk about front of
Trojan Boulevard.
the tire to the dry cleaners.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can park on the side of that street?
Yeah, okay.
I don't think so.
I think, let's see. Isn't there,
I don't think so.
It's not a lot.
no,
It's pretty tight.
okay.
Is the right of way for the street wider than what's currently built out? Cause like on State Street it is.
Yeah,
State Street's a wider street than 125.
Well, but even from what it is today, like in my parents' property, the state owns halfway up the front yard.
Right, okay, I see what you're saying.
And
I don't know the answer to that.
yeah, see, this is a
Typically
50,
properly-
a 50-foot right of way. Whereas, I don't know states off, but this is more narrow than our current standard.
I think it hurts you to,
So,
let people be creative. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I can do it.
right,
It looks like we're about 5 feet short. So this is 55 and our local street cross section is about 60.
but then you take the park strip out of that and the sidewalk out of that, you haven't got much actual asphalt road width. To park on-street parking, there's not much road width there.
Yeah.
It's, and again, I like the concept, and the idea is great, but will it work there?
I think it will.
On-street
Go ahead.
parking on that street? I'm not
So
seeing
if
it.
you go back to the zone we were talking about.
I'm not seeing it.
In reference to this, there's really only one, if you look down 125, the only building lot is Jeff Matthews. Like, that's the only
Yeah,
one that could be
so I wanna
built
sit
on right
there.
now. So,
Until people sell.
yes. So my question would be, if you back out, is there any other part that is considered, and go across the freeway over by the car dealerships, that is all zone commercial. But right through, not the A one, if they would make that available, but keep going further west. Right there, the CH. See, like, this is where if you go down the freeway, Salt Lake River, if you see, which I'd drive me nuts to be that close to the road, but there is mixed residential, commercial right there. Where they'll have something down low and have that. And I don't know if that's also something you add to something like this, because I don't know, I think that land is actually available.
It is.
And that is open space that right now someone could develop something and start to use it. And it would be, in my opinion, I'm not a developer, but in my opinion, that'd be an easier one to do. Not taking away from what you're talking
I
about
can visualize
downtown.
it there.
But if you're gonna do it for that one, why not do it for the other ones too?
Well, the only thing is that doesn't do any, in the highway commercial, doesn't really focus and promote the downtown. And that, in most cities, the downtown is your economic engine. And I think before we start spreading things out, I think we need to focus on the downtown, especially where we have those who want to come in, essentially participate in the city's vision
Yeah.
from a
I
private
do
sector.
like the concept though.
Yeah.
And part of what I'm wondering, let's say if all we get are dealerships there, you're never gonna have that verticality. Cause it's just now you have to wait for that use to run a cycle.
Oh, yeah, once the dealership starts, it's,
But if you create that up front, you may get, those multi-family housing projects on top and then something down low. And I think that's okay. I don't know that
So,
takes away from downtown.
I don't think the commercial would do very good there at all. I would just, if you were
Well,
gonna
yeah.
do housing there, I would just do straight up housing.
Well, I don't disagree with that. It's just that there's not many options in Morgan City that we can
in
do
the
this.
city.
However,
I'm not visualizing that.
I did just go back over to Commercial Street on it.
Yeah,
Because the other lots, there's 3 lots specifically, the 2 in front of the hotel, the one that's on the corner.
Yeah.
But then right here on the backside of the trailer park, like when that alleyway goes in, my understanding is all right there where your cursor is, that is all also zoned commercial and would be available for
yeah,
commercial building, correct?
that's
Now
correct.
that to me would also fit well there. Parking would be helped with the alleyway, but I think there's enough space there that more commercial could go in and the mixed use would actually work there.
I've looked at it. It's tight, but it would work.
Yeah, well, that's where you go up. Like, that's where a 3 or 4 story building would do well there, right?
The buildings will go, but in my mind, I'm not seeing enough parking left there.
Well, think about parking as like, they'll figure it out. We just want to require a basic number amount.
If we leave the parking requirement as part of it, then yeah.
Yeah,
but the-
yes,
the-
I'm not, I don't want to throw parking requirements out. We're not going down that road.
The two caveats in there, there's not gonna be any on-street parking, so that's not a caveat to help them out.
Yeah, the on-street would be very limited and it would
The
only
other
be
piece
per,
you talked about, I'm not understanding yet, you talked about shared between the business and the residential. Most people come home at what, 5, 6 o'clock. So you're talking about all your commercials gonna be close their doors at 5 o'clock?
there could be some overlap, but a lot of
Where
time,
where do I park when I come home at 6 o'clock and the restaurant's still open?
well, you just have to walk a little bit.
Mhm.
But
You can't park at my house.
there would be some dedicated parking for the residential, and then others would be more flex space.
I love the concept, I hope it works there, but in my mind, I'm just not seeing that part yet because of limited space there.
Yeah, okay.
If some architect can design something fancy and make it work, yeah, I'm okay with the concept.
And that's what we're talking concepts and planning principles tonight.
I know if I was going to live in one of the residential areas, if I didn't have a designated parking spot, that would be, I wouldn't go there. I mean, to have to find a place to park when I come home.
You and your wife, how many spaces are you gonna need?
Well, and think about there's different levels. There's some kind of basic dedicated residential parking, and then there's more flexible space, and then there's also the commercial use too. And there's a fair amount of flex there. I've seen this, it works out quite well. It's just a matter of mixing a little bit. And also you have to think about, you're in maybe a different position than maybe some of these renters, especially if they're younger college students or something like that. They're just happy to have a place to stay. And I think that's kind of where we're at in Morgan in terms of there's not a whole lot of options for entry level buying or even renting.
Again, my neighborhood's abnormal, I get that. But my neighborhood, the homes, 2 homes across the street around the corner, they both work from home. So their cars stay parked all day long. They don't leave them today to go to work somewhere. They work from home. So the shared parking doesn't work in that situation, at least in my neighborhood, it wouldn't work.
Well, on that house, but there's other
There's the
ones,
the 3 right around me.
and they all work from home?
The others down the cul-de-sac, yes, they go to work.
Yeah, but the market drives that. If it doesn't work for somebody, they're not
Yeah,
gonna buy that
but-
house.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah,
thank you. That's, I think having that, just think, we're looking at planning principles, getting the most out of the land that we can and optimizing. And I think with, you know, Morgan in this commercial area is mostly built out, not entirely. Some of it may be redeveloped and some of it may be infill. But I think we have to look at creative solutions. And if we require everything as is out of the rule book from 20 years ago, you're not going to get a project. But if we allow for some flexibility, some creativity, and let the private market look at how they'd like to do it, you'll see things happen because Teresa sees it more than me, but I think people are calling all the time wanting to know what they could do in Morgan. And if we could just adjust the zoning to allow for the mixed use, I think we'll see some applicants come in. And in fact, and we have one, we have one that's asking.
And it's not just empty lots, it's redeveloping some areas too.
Older buildings that don't have a lot of economic or real estate value.
That makes sense. I mean, from my standpoint, you'd originally asked, should we take this concept, this principle, and start thinking about a draft ordinance? And my vote is yes. I think we absolutely do that. There's gonna be some details to work out, of course, but but conceptually, yeah, let's start the process.
Okay.
I agree. I would expand it though. The reason I think some of us have this is that we know commercial street is so restricted right now. So if they can be creative with it, do it. But like looking at your other zoning here,
Yeah.
I mean, if you asked anyone in Morgan, what's downtown? I mean, everyone's like, well, it used to be commercial street.
Yeah.
It's State Street. State Street is what everyone else considers downtown, whether we want it to be downtown or not. So I would say along State Street, you've got just as much potential and more than commercial street for this kind of concept. I wouldn't, I mean, there's not that much more area there. I would apply it to commercial street for that matter.
State Street.
I mean, sorry, State Street, yes. I'd go to all the way, I'd go as far down State Street as you have on the map for that, that general commercial or commercial general or whatever, you have that. Because then you do have people that say, hey, well, there's a house on this. I could knock it down. I could put a business there, but I could also keep residential. Like that to me feels, you're
More
giving
doable.
more opportunity
more
to do it
Yeah.
because
Do you have the general plan, the
it's
new
just not
general plan
enough.
that, I can't remember what
opportunity,
State
I think,
Street's
make a
supposed to
difference if
be.
We want it on commercial street.
What did we talk about State Street being?
State Street is,
Would
well,
you
this
do-
part is identified as highway commercial.
Young Street.
Yes.
Yep, I do the whole way.
South of the river is identified as,
And then you.
as
just let it
general
happen as it
commercial, I
happens.
think.
Yep.
Oh, here it is right here. Sorry, let's zoom in.
Yeah,
This
from
will
the,
help.
from the railroad underpass all the way to Young Street. would make
Okay,
sense.
as downtown boulevard and commercial. The only
looking
thing
around.
is, that doesn't quite match up with the general plan, what you're talking, because this section is identified as both State Street corridor, more standard commercial. I'm wondering if you're okay with a baby step
Do it to
with,
the river.
well, then we're splitting zones and changing zones. I'm almost asking if we take a baby step with central commercial because we have, 3 property owners that have been asking and talking. And then this year we're doing, as part of the downtown, we're gonna do more of a code overhaul. Then we look at that and we actually move boundaries.
I mean, if it's a baby step, I guess I'm speaking for myself here, like, I'm definitely good with commercial street. But I also am good to go as far as we can go with it because I don't think it hurts us at all.
And not much is gonna happen.
State Street is actually, I mean, again, opinion here, State Street is becoming in a lot of ways abandoned from Young Street back. I mean, you had Chicken or the Spring Chicken Inn go out, you had Pretzel Maker go out, you had Jay's go out, Popcorn Drive-In's gone out, like all the food establishments and commercial from Young Street working back towards is all kind of gone away.
Yeah, everything's moving.
And so there's a few reasons for that, but like, that's what you're running into. And you've even got people, which I know we've talked about it, that are developing, which would have been a great central of the city that's just went residential instead of, being able to add more commercial space available, because that's where it is. Anyway, that's my opinion, I think it's fine to do the commercial.
What does everyone else think?
Let me
I'm
ask you,
I'm
Jake,
open to
I feel like
exploring it.
you've given us all of the pros and all of the reasons why
Yeah.
this is great. Are there any cons that we should be aware of?
I think there could be a case with the parking, it could be busy in some area. Anytime a small town changes, people, nostalgia kind of thing. I think that's kind of it in terms of what we're really talking about. This is a very safe one. Only a few types of projects would go in where we require commercial on the front. And
And so where we're talking about right now for the time being is the area that was in yellow on the map, just the downtown.
yes, that's what I brought up.
Okay.
Yeah, let's draft the
And
ordinance.
Justin's saying, let's look at the
We
other
can
areas.
Expand boundaries, but let's draft the ordinance.
Yeah. that
Okay.
makes
And
sense.
maybe we do
And I
that at
do
adoption
love the
or not.
concept.
Okay, what I'm looking at is it's not a new ordinance, it's just a modification to the ordinance. We bring in the mixed use and then we add some requirements. The building on the street, maybe a certain percentage of glass, some doors that face the street. I don't know if you've seen this in Cache Valley, almost before you get to Logan, there's these kind of cute, nice looking little commercial buildings off the left of the highway. They're kind of like looking like a main street. Well, the parking and the front doors and all that's all the way around on the other side and everything. And that's because it's a highway. And it does make sense that you're going to drive around and all that. But in this case where you can walk at slower speeds, we do want those doors on. Doesn't mean you can't have doors anywhere else, but you want some doors and that frontage facing on. And the one thing also, Justin, there's a little bit of difference between State Street and Commercial Street in terms of State Street that's your main thoroughfare. And so the negative there could be, if it were this beautiful main street, it would also be slower to get out of town. And maybe that's a good thing. But that would change as well. Where the other streets that we're talking about, they're not the main thoroughfares, and there's going to be very little traffic impact by slowing it
That's
down.
about thinking Center Street in Provo, and you're going 15 miles an hour.
And State Street is a UDOT corridor, and so access will have to be, we'll have to talk.
I agree with that. It's just the fact that that's where Morgan is. So I'm also all for trying to designate a new city main street that we could do something with and say, hey, let's work towards that. Because right now you don't have another option. You're right.
And maybe we can find a hybrid that works for state in the future. That's what I'm thinking could happen.
Would you look at other cities? Logan, Bountiful, so forth. Do they have a commercial street and then a State Street type thing to get into the city? I like Bountiful. Bountiful doesn't have the two. They got business on both their main streets going through town. Their old main street plus the major highway going through has got a commercial on both sides of that.
Right.
But look at Logan, same thing in Logan. So do you know another example of a city that's got a state? Do we need to keep State Street, State Street? Is there another state that does that?
Yeah, in terms of a one-sided commercial main street, there's not a whole lot.
Is there none that keeps State Street sacred rather than turn it into commercial? Another city you can identify.
I'm not quite getting that. Will you
You're saying
explain
we
that?
need to keep State Street for some other reasons. Is there another city you can identify that's got a State Street that they've kept away from developing into a commercial area?
Well, a lot of times with the UDOT requirements, you don't see a UDOT corridor being very mixed use and walkable and all that. You will see the buildings and the commercial uses, but the
Right.
access and the speed are different. Logan is a great example. Have you seen Center Street in Logan? They rebuilt it. It's just beautiful. That's a city street, and so they made it nice. Where even though Main Street has really nice buildings, it's a fast speed, it's loud, it's noisy, and so you always are held back. Fortunately, State Street here is not a very fast, I don't know, is it 40 miles? 30,
It's only
30. And I think people typically drive at 30, right? 32, okay.
You talk about UDOT access. All the homes, all the properties already have established access. So you're not gonna have to be establishing new accesses.
Right, but anytime you have a redevelopment, you do have to work with UDOT on it. Now, you may already be granted that access and you're replacing one for one, but there still is that challenge. I just bring that up where there's so many factors where State Street is different than 125 and commercial that it's not completely, but yes, that's where the action is. Yes, that's where the people are. That's where your new buildings are happening and your change is happening there. So I don't think we should ignore that either.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
a
make.
good example to that access is the Anderson subdivision, what he had to go through with the state
For two
for
homes.
2 homes.
And just to let you know, on Commercial Street, it is commercial, so residentials can be there until they change to a commercial, but Commercial Street also has a live-work unit, just to let you know. So there is that option. It still has a tool. It's not the best. But if somebody wanted to do a live-work unit, so they have, a commercial business and a residential, the code is already allowed on Commercial Street to do so. You can also have bed and breakfast on Commercial Street that you can't have in some other areas, but. So there is some options. It's not the best, but there is something there already.
Yeah. Chair, would it be okay if we asked Jason, Dave, maybe their thoughts, or Gary, if any
Let's
of
go ahead
our
and do that.
our
We've
online
got,
crowd?
Just a couple minutes before we transition to the general session. But yeah, I'd love to hear your comments.
You know, I think I'd like to see us move forward. I think it's a little bit progressive and as much as anything gives us some options, another tool in our belt, if you will. At the same time, the concerns, the parking and the accessibility and all probably need to be paid attention to. And some way let the developer know that it has to be done right, that the parking has to work, and it may be tight, it may be hard to figure out, but we will be looking at that and considering it and making sure that it's in place.
Well, Jake and I talked a little bit about this, and we have met with developers who are interested in doing this, and they're a good quality developer, but that doesn't mean, that you're essentially planning for the future in whether it's this developer or another developer, whoever it happens to be. So you've got to look ahead and you got to say, well, let's fit. Jake's proposal that we make a couple of tweaks right now and then take a look at it on a maybe larger scale in the future is probably not a bad one, because there are some things that we can fix that aren't impossibly irreversible. I've also indicated that I'm a firm believer in development agreements. It holds the feet of the developer to the fire, and in that you can include your elevations, in other words, we know what we get and they know what they get, and they're very, very useful, and it would be useful in these types of developments.
All right, thank you. Let's take our places on the dais. We'll conclude our work session and then start a general session. Thanks. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, members of the community. We appreciate all of you joining us tonight for our Planning Commission meeting. Tonight is Tuesday, December 17th, and we will commence. My name is Nathan McClellan. I am the chairperson of the Planning Commission, and we will start off just with a reminder that this is being a live broadcast and recorded. So for those of you, just to pay mind to that. Tonight's agenda, before we jump into, we will review the minutes. I'd like to call for a motion to approve those minutes from our November meeting. If everyone's had a chance to review those, then let's go ahead and take that action now.
I'll make the motion that we approve them as they are currently.
Thank you. Is there a second on that? All right, all in favor? And let me ask a question, Gary. Last month you asked me to do a verbal roll call. Do you want to hear ayes? Is that what we need to be doing as opposed to just raising our hands?
So not on just perfunctory matters such as approval of the minutes, those types of things, but on a specific zone change recommendation, city council, yes. Or on your approvals of subdivision ordinance or conditional uses, yes. Roll call.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. All right. So simple raise of hand if you're in favor. And Jay, I see you as well. So that's unanimous. Our agenda goes as follows. We have two items tonight. They both involve the historic overlay zone on Commercial Street. So the first one we'll address is for a signage review for Deb's Spicy Pie located at 113 Commercial Street. And I believe we have a representative online that can talk about some of this in a minute. But in our packets, it also included the information. So hopefully most of us have reviewed that as well. Jake, is there anything you'd like to add from a staff standpoint before we jump into this?
I will. I'll say this again. I just think it needs to be on the public record. When I was putting together these reports, I had the understanding that the city code strictly prohibited off-premise signs, meaning you don't putting a sign off your property, and that's not exactly true. The code does not. It doesn't allow, but neither does it prohibit in terms of off-premise. You do have to have written authorization from the landowner. And in the past, the city has stayed clear of off-premise signs, and we still may want to do that in the future. But I just wanted to clarify, we went back through the code. Teresa's looked at it, and also Gary, and we looked at it.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll get to that when we get to that
Yeah.
point on the
Because
hotel.
I was going to say, yeah, that doesn't.
I did
sound
dive
consistent.
into number two.
That's
but
okay.
we
But
can
there's
start-
also precedent for some of that on the corner of State Street and Commercial. There's off-premise signs there
Yeah.
already. And then same thing on Industrial Road going down. Yeah. Okay. But with respect to the Deb's proposal, did you have anything to add on that one?
Well, I'll just go over in my report.
Okay.
If you're ready. we
Yeah,
can
I'm ready.
dive in.
Let's jump in.
Okay, so I'll just run through a little bit of the background. It's in the historic overlay zone, but also in the CC on Commercial Street. There's the building right there. Another view as well. Here's the existing building. And part of what they're trying to do, this is a historical photo provided by the applicant, so they like that idea. I think that's where the actual inspiration came from.
Well, that's the original place.
Okay,
That's the same place.
that's the same place. I don't know what year that sign came down, but during black and white days. So this is, this rendering was provided by the applicant, and then we clarify they do meet our 11 feet right here. That's one of our requirements from the historic overlay. Here are the dimensions. So it does meet the dimensions in terms of it's less than 4 feet wide. It's 4 or less. So the width where it projects out it meets the dimensions. And then also the height is acceptable. And I think it does have a historic nature to it. So I think it does meet that. And of course, they're tying into the history of it. There is one thing that I want to bring up that's also code related, is that our historic overlay, I want to get to the lighting where I had that. So in terms of materials, it's a metal sign, aluminum, that's acceptable. It really, I think, matches up just great with the code. We have a discrepancy in the code, and we don't necessarily maybe we do a quick discussion on this. So the code says that lighting shall be directed at the sign from an external. However, we do have 2 cases of where the city has approved internal lighting. The bank building
Wardell Brothers.
and the Wardell Brothers. And the Wardell Brothers was approved as internal lighting to limit glare and going on to adjacent properties. And the code also, the historic overlay does give discretion to the planning commission. So you do have it, there's some blurry boundaries there in terms of if you can make that decision to go outside that. So you do have authority to do that. But also, you'll notice here that it says that, and then also in the code, it allows for neon signs, and neon sign is an example of an internal lit, right? The light's inside and it's coming out. And so that's where I'm saying, is this something that we should change afterwards? I don't want to hold up the application or change the application approval, but I'm saying maybe at our next meeting, we could actually just remove this unless anybody feels strongly about it. In my opinion, internal lighting is some of the best lighting you can have because you're not getting that glaring and going anywhere. It's within the sign. There's plenty of historic precedents of internal. We do allow for neon, which is internal. So there is that contradiction. And we have 2 cases within last 5 years where the city has approved that. So put that aside for a second. But in terms of a staff report, I think the sign looks great. There's no issues in terms of my report and nothing to hold it back. And then on the lighting, you could approve as is, or you could approve saying you're approved, just don't turn on the light until we change the ordinance next month. But maybe you could just approve it as is, where you have that discretion as well, and the city has. And then if you agree as a planning commission, I can come back next month with the ordinance update just to remove that. I wouldn't change anything else about the ordinance, just remove the internal lighting prohibition, just because it's contradicting in a number of ways, and I don't know why it was there, but it doesn't match up.
Approve as is if we choose.
Yeah, yeah. Gary, do you have a comment on that?
No, I think Jake and I've talked about this, and the new signing is very, very different than it was back when this ordinance was written. I remember when we wrote the ordinance, and the illumination that they have these days can be very, very acceptably traditional. So what Deb's has proposed is an exact example of how historically it's in line, but this one provision would prevent, could prevent something like that from going in unless you interpret it the way that Jake's suggesting. So I think you can interpret it that way, and and be fine in doing so, but just to be safe, in the future, I would take that provision out. I'd recommend it be taken out, if you see fit to do that.
I'm comfortable proceeding that direction, but for tonight, this one feels pretty straightforward. The one question that I have is related to the color scheme. So it looks like all the height requirements and everything's been, complied with. If we pull back, and I don't have an issue with the color, I just want to make sure that that's aligned. So I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that, as far as the palette, but is it?
Oh, it's for building exterior, not for something.
So signs can be anything.
The color palette.
Okay, so the signs aren't subject to that at all?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the color scheme, in particular, I like the color scheme because it goes back to the original sign that used to be there. I mean, it's very historical, right? So I think the color is great. It ties it back into what it was originally.
I've got two questions. The first one in regards to the lighting on it then, is it fluorescent lighting that highlights the words in white, or is it I know it's metal, but I'm trying to understand how it actually,
I think it's the white part that lights up.
okay,
My comment about the neon.
Yeah.
What was just that our code allows for neon. I didn't see anything about this being a neon.
It's not neon. it's just
Yeah, I didn't-
Lights that shine
I-
out.
yeah, so,
And if you want to get,
yeah, so that's a question. If you look at the one at the bank building, it's actually an external, it's similar in style to this, but it's an external, looks like a neon light on the outside.
Yeah.
And that's my question, is that how it's lit up or is it completely inside? So if the,
let's let the applicant.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, will you state your name for us, please? And
Yeah,
then-
Jay Bingham.
Sorry, I was talking over you. Now I missed your name.
Jay Bingham.
All right, thanks, Jay. Address that question on how the lighting works.
Yeah, I actually worked on the bank building as well. And that's authentic neon tubing on that sign. Most of the authentic neon is kind of starting to go away, just because of the new technology that's come out. So they've come up with what they call a faux LED neon. So it appears as if it was neon, but it's LED lighting actually. And so on this sign, the Spicy Pie, Debs, and Cafe would have a single tube LED neon that's exposed and it lights directly out. There's no cover or anything over the letters. That was per code, if I remember right. That was allowed as long as it was a single tube of neon.
Thank you, Jay. Does that address your?
yeah, that answers the question. So none of the other parts of the sign will be lit up. It's just the white and the white will be lit up with a faux neon.
Yeah,
LED sign, which that makes sense. So in the end, it's going to look like the outline of those letters with a light.
Well, it won't be the outline. It'll be right in the center.
I mean, sorry, the middle, like it'll be the
Yes.
core of the letter.
Yep. And then the white vertical stripes, those are just vinyl. They won't be lighting, and neither will any of the orange and yellow. It looks a little bit better without having transmitted the drawing. The oranges are much closer together, so they kind of blend a little bit better with the red.
Okay. The second part of my question was, I sit in some of the meetings with the Historical Society and the Preservation Society. Have they looked at this do we know? I don't know. I don't know if it's even a requirement, but it isn't. But it is nice for them to be in the loop at all. Have they weighed in on this from a city standpoint, or do we know?
No, I hadn't got on with her. We didn't send it to her, this one.
Okay.
We don't need to.
Right. And this would just be for information, that I do know that there have been some changes on Commercial Street, which have changed the contributing, it's like contributing factor. Aaron, maybe you could help me with some of the wording here, but there's like contributing, historic, and there's another word there, qualifying, contributing, but the changes, some of the exterior changes on those buildings has actually taken out of those contributing historic buildings and has been a concern for that society. Again, not required, but where this is a historic district and they would like to keep it that way. I don't think this would upset them, just my opinion on it, but it might not be a bad idea if the applicant would like to, wants to do that. They don't have to, but if they wanted to run it by them for their input, that might not be a bad idea.
And following your vote tonight, it could be up to the app.
Correct.
I think they would probably like it.
I suspect they would love it. And I agree that I don't want to speak for the Preservation Society, but I don't think that this would compromise the structural integrity or the historical integrity of the building at all, especially where it does harken back to the original signage.
What other questions do we have as a commission? There's no other questions, and let's take action, either to approve or not. If someone wants to make a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the signage for Deb's Spicy Pie located at 113 Commercial Street as proposed.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion?
I will second that.
Aaron, thank you. Before we vote, any further discussion on the motion? And let's go ahead and vote. All in favor of the motion as proposed? That's unanimous. I see your hand, Jay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's move to the second agenda item. Just need to scroll back here. This is with respect to the signage for Comfort Inn located at 215 Commercial Street. As the brand is changing with that hotel property. So again, Jake, if you want to catch us up with staff report, and then I know we've got the applicant here as well that we can talk through this when we get to that point. So Jake, if you want to start us off.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this project is on 215 Commercial Street. This is the hotel, the one hotel in town, and they are changing branding and management. And as I mentioned before, there is a little bit of confusion about off-premise signs. Commissioner Little cited a few locations in the city where there are some off-premise signs, but also the code doesn't call it out as being allowed. And there's different components of this sign application, and Planning Commission could approve all of them, or you could approve some of the components of it as well, as which is what I'm recommending. But you do have that option on it. It is in the historic overlay, and it is in also Central Commercial just down the street. There's the hotel, Google Earth. Here's a picture from this week, or last week actually, of the current sign there, the cobblestone sign. And then also here's a picture of the monument sign. And one thing I do have to say, in talking with staff, this sign was not ever approved, that it was just built. and allowed to stay by the city, but was never actually approved nor retrospectively approved either. So that is a challenging factor with this application and condition.
Is that sign on hotel property?
No, it's not. And it's not, again, it wasn't actually approved. They just went out and built it, and the city told them it was illegal, but it was never asked to, it
When
was
those-
never demanded to be taken down.
When those front parcels are developed, would that have to come down anyway? Because isn't it on their property?
It could be, yes, yeah. It makes sense. And if they were developed, it'd be difficult or it wouldn't be worth it to work around it. So I bring that up as history. Teresa knows more. Can ask her to expand if we need to. This is from the application. So we have essentially 6 signs, the 3 on the building, on the little cupola on top, on the 3 sides, north, east, and west, not particularly south. And then also we have a directional sign, a pylon sign, that's the pole sign, is that right? The pylon is essentially the pole sign, and then an additional directional sign as well. This is from the application. You'll see the before and proposed with the comfort. It also does have an internal LED within it, so that would fall under the same discussion we just had in terms of being lit. And then here is the proposed directional sign being replaced on that. And on this, we also don't have a written authorization from the landowner on that. The hotel has approved it, but from the other landowner. So you could pause this as we look at it further and discuss it as well. And then here is the pylon or kind of the pole sign as well. It is 25 feet high, and there's the dimensions there, approximately 7 by 6. This one also, I didn't get as much into the review because again, it was the question of authorization and off premise as well.
You're saying that sign also is not on hotel property?
Yeah, all 3, let me go up to the site plan. Yeah, right here. You see where they're at? They're at the two pads out front on those.
What's the reasoning behind having 4 and 5?
What's the direction?
Should we?
My name's Jeff Grayson, by the way. I'm with Rise Signs.
Okay, thank you.
That's a directional sign that's right out towards where that other one was. And then the pylon sign was mid-range in that area. It's a little taller. But I think they wanted that double marking on there because that Comfort Inn is high enough with the pole sign to see from the freeway. So, and then the other directional is similar to that one towards the gas station.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's see. Let me just see if there's anything else. I had the same comments, similar comments on the lighting. I don't think we need to rehash that. That's a similar. And then I apart from the lighting comment, I don't see any issues with the building signs. And then the other ones we will have to look at a little bit closer and discuss, and also up to the direction of the planning commission. But I don't have any more from the report.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I see it too. The building signs seem pretty straightforward on this one. The monument sign, wouldn't that be subject to the same standards as anything else on Commercial Street? um,
You're talking about polar monument.
the monument. So the pole hits the 11 feet high, but the monument sign's on the ground. So, I mean, it doesn't meet that requirement. And I guess that's the question. And besides the fact that we don't have approval documented from the landowner.
Yeah, to me, the height is a moot point. I'm comfortable with proving them putting signage on property without the property owner's approval. So,
I do have an authorization. This just wasn't true.
Okay.
Of property in front. Correct. So I have authorization from the landlord for the hotel, but those two
Okay.
lots that are in front are not. So it's finding a different location for those areas, which I've discussed, and that's kind of the area that we want. Like that side. I'll repeat it. Okay. No, just to give you some backup information, this is actually, the signage is going to be built by Ace Signs, which is out of state, and they ship it to us and we install it and permit it. So basically, in discussion with Ace Signs and their build and their design, because this is primarily their design, it's in this site area that they weren't aware of this property line. So they're on that page 3, I suggested that they possibly put the pylon sign in that gourd area where the grassy is, right there in that top left corner, to be able to put the pylon sign right there instead. So the smaller signs are more directional signs is all they are. And the Comfort Inn Suites pylon sign is more of their branding. And they have brand standards on there, and that's why they have directional signs going into the property. And then
in
their
that
main
grassy
market.
area, is that owned by the hotel
Yes,
currently?
that's part of their property line.
Okay, so
Inside.
that would resolve that issue.
Yes.
You want to kind of direct me, like, see, I got the little hand on the screen.
Yeah.
And are you thinking over here by the
Yes.
tree?
Yes.
In that area?
Yeah, right. On page 3 of that one, you can see where the property line ends right at the edge of the parking lot. And it crosses over into that squared area.
Okay.
And so you go up to page 3. One more, yeah. You can see that line that goes across there,
Yeah.
and that's in their boundaries. That's what I suggested to them, so they were trying to communicate with the landowner and the customer regarding that placement, if there's a placement change on that. So that's kind of what we're still working out on that end, so.
Full sign.
And just a background, you see how actually the two property owners, and they don't own property to Commercial Street. It was an easement driveway to the hotel. So,
All the trees.
yeah, when
Okay.
the hotel had originally came in, it's a conditional use permit for a hotel as well as the historic overlay. So during that time is when the facade of the building was approved, along with the signs on the top of the building. And so that was part of the building permit. During the erection of the building, this sign appeared and was not part of the building permit or anything with the conditional use permit. The owner of the hotel also owned the property in the front, and it ended up staying, but an illegal sign, and it's no longer the same owner of the original hotel. And now it was sold to someone else. Yeah,
I think it was a separate parcel.
it's
but-
still a separate
But
parcel.
he owned it. So
Right.
certainly that owner authorization part would have been okay.
Yeah.
It just wasn't included in the building plans and the application and the approval process. Correct, yeah.
Could I ask a question on this? So regarding the illegal sign, even if we did say it fits all the standards, it's really at the risk of the hotel owner, because if they never get authorization and that other owner says no, like, it doesn't matter if we say it's good or not. I mean, if we say yes, great, but it's still gonna be at the owner's discretion whether it's in. If we say no, then I guess it's a no, but it's really depends on the owner when it
I
comes
mean,
down to
what's
it.
the order of things? Because it feels
Yeah.
like to me that we should, rather than approve something and then there's leverage for a developer to go up to a property owner and say, hey, we've already got this approved from planning commission. I would rather get the permission first and then we can address it.
Yep.
I make a
And
comment?
also we could look at, you could modify the application to move the sign elsewhere or the blade sign. It,
Can I make a comment too, Jake and Mr. Chair?
Let's see, we had Gary, I think you were speaking.
Yeah, I might want to turn all the mics on, but the illegal sign is there without the permission of the property owner to begin with, and definitely without the permission of the city to put it there. And while I recognize that we have off-premise signs in other parts of the city that have come in and that we haven't enforced against, the rule is for municipalities is that just because one illegal sign continues to exist, or one violation of the zoning ordinance continues to exist, doesn't mean you have to allow it to continue to exist. This one is pretty blatant because they didn't, I believe the city told them up front that they were not to put a sign there before they actually constructed it. But even if they hadn't, it's an off-premise sign, and the city has not allowed off-premise signs for obvious reasons. Otherwise, you can get the equivalent of billboards, and how do you measure the size of an off-premise sign? There's specific requirements in the code that Teresa has pointed out in 1032-140 that actually gives the size of the signs that are available to businesses, and they all provide that they be on-premise or on-site signs. And there is no provision for off-premise signs. You could build any size you wanted if you were to allow it.
So Gary, what's the default? Because if you don't specifically exclude something, is it implicitly approved?
Just the opposite way.
It's the opposite way.
You
So you
don't-
have to explicitly approve something or it's not allowed.
Or it's not allowed. Mhm.
Okay, so then that's different than what we were
Different what
thinking
Jake told
earlier.
us, yeah.
Where,
You
yes,
should-
it's not specifically allowed, but it's not specifically prohibited, but it doesn't have to be prohibited because that's implied.
And what Jake was referring to is, he was referring to if there's a discrepancy. In other words, there's two ways of interpreting an ordinance. The default always goes to the property owner. But in this case, we don't even have a property owner. And I don't think there's a discrepancy in the way that the city has interpreted it in the past, other than, with a couple of exceptions. I don't think we would allow or have allowed off-premise signs by approval. We haven't actually approved them. But I guess what I'm saying is that the moving of the larger sign is a good move. I think that brings the sign into compliance regarding the off-premise, on-premise question. And the size then just needs to be determined by the code. And there are sign regulations, but it sounds like it fits. But this one is definitely an illegal sign. It was built illegally, and it is still illegal. So I guess what the planning commission is going to have to decide is you can do one of two things. Either you can take the drastic step of changing the law and saying off-premise signs are permitted. You're allowed to have them, and authorizing them just generally in the city, studying it and determining that maybe off-premise signs might be permitted in certain circumstances and outlining what those circumstances are, or interpreting the code to say that unless it's just the opposite of what is generally implied in a zoning ordinance, that is, that in this case, unless it's specifically designated that off-premise signs are not permitted, we're going to allow them to exist. So there's three different choices that you can make at this point on on that last sign. The directional sign, I think, is okay, Jake, was it not under the code? I believe that was just the small directional that they were looking at putting in there.
But if it's off premise,
that's what
doesn't
we're
that
talking
have the
about.
same problem?
Yeah, oh, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
They would have,
Is it possible to do let's say we split it and did some type of partial approval, so that the applicant can move forward with the signs on the building and then potentially move the pole sign
Yes.
onto premise and then follow the code from there.
that you could do.
I'm gonna bring up the historic overlay part, because we have essentially two codes. We have our sign ordinance, and then on Commercial Street, there's a historic overlay zone, which has a small section on it, and that it's kind of rules dictating other rules. And this is what it says here, and this is in 10-1490. 090. So flush mounted is okay. Projecting sign, that was the Debs one. Flush mounted would be on the building, a window sign, an awning sign, and then a directory sign, and then the temporary sandwich signs. So I don't, at this point, I don't see one that fits the pylon pole sign on it.
So you're saying that that wouldn't be, the pylon pole sign wouldn't be approved on that, in that area?
From what I can see, and I don't know that we had any approved or anything like that. Yeah.
With that being set back onto the property, not near Industrial Road? That's,
Being in our historic overlay code, it's not in there.
okay. So that wouldn't fly on, that wouldn't be approved on that end too?
No.
Okay, well, and that's what I need to know to take back. That's the information I need, because I'm, like I said, I know the building signage is fine. It's just these directionals and the pylon sign that was concerning with me too, with the property line and everything, so.
Yeah.
But
okay.
if the pylon sign couldn't be approved on that grassy area, could a monument be in that area? I mean, it probably is gonna be redundant because you're not gonna be able to see it as well.
Yeah. I think we would have to look at that a little bit closer. The code is really written for the smaller buildings on Commercial Street. The hotel is kind of the one outlier. It's set back, it's a bigger building, it's new. And so it just doesn't fit within how the code was written.
Yeah, because that hotel has a lot more square footage than the other building areas too around it too.
Yeah. So we could discuss it and look at it, but I'm not necessarily looking at the code. I'm not seeing an obvious answer at this point, but
Okay.
again, defer to the planning commission as the direction you want to go.
Justin has some thoughts and then maybe we can
Yeah.
kind of.
And I agree with your idea of splitting it there, but just a thought, and I don't know if this is allowed or not in this, but there's obviously a very large sign that's out front there for 7-Eleven. And that's already there. If it's even a possibility to talk to that owner and see if space is available there, could they not put up a sign if the other owners allowed it? And I mean, it's already a pylon sign. That one obviously doesn't fit that ordinance anyway either, right? I don't even know,
Yeah.
like the big 7-Eleven sign you can see for miles.
I don't know how that one got put in.
That's an
Anyway.
odd premise.
Well,
For the-
I'm just saying that if there's struggles to do the other things,
Right.
because I know they want to get the business up and going, I
Is it
think
an
we need.
option to explore?
Correct, that's all I'm saying.
So-
It's already there.
Add additional signage to the pylon sign that's existing there.
Again, I don't know
Yeah.
what that introduces, but
And you don't know if that, in my experience with the sign industry, it's knowing that if they have maxed out that square footage allowance for that sign based on wind load and the structural engineering of that sign too. So if you add more signage, you're adding more square footage to it with the engineering. So it's all, that's a good,
I'm not the
that's a
sign
great
expert.
thought.
All
though.
I know is that sign is already there.
Yeah,
So-
that's a great thought, though. That's something to consider, but based on the engineering, I wouldn't even, and how long has that sign been there? You know, I mean,
20 years
yeah.
at least.
So I'm sure engineering and codes have changed on sign size
Yeah,
on
right
that end
there.
too. So, but that's actually good. That's something to look at. But yeah, if the pylon sign as of right now and the directional signs are not allowed based on the historical code, then that's not going to fly. And so, yeah, as long as we approve of the building signage, it's getting back to Comfort Inn and their corporate and their branding and what they're going to say and see. So,
Can I ask one other question, just for this? And this goes to those, like in the picture on like the Google Street View, there's actually like the flag signs that stick in the grass.
Mhm.
And I'm only looking at this as, help. It is, we said those are allowed, right? Like you don't have to have any permitting to go stick a sign in the ground in the grass, right?
Temporary. stuff.
It's temporary. Okay.
temporary.
I just, is trying to launch a business and changing and branding, like,
Yeah.
we don't have any restrictions for that, do we?
I mean, we just looked at what's available. So
Yeah.
a sandwich sign or something out front. that's
Yeah.
covered potentially, but
Do you want to mention, I know the owner of the barbecue place told me about, he had the crazy wind thing.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, in terms of temporary, just, it says A-frame.
Yeah, and we
Sandwich
have
board.
we have in the section of code that allows for grand openings and limited time where it's a limited time
Oh,
offer to
okay.
do those things. So if they're doing a grand opening before and after, you can have temporary signs, things like that. But for example, the barbecue place was having them up constantly, and that's not allowed as per the code. Sandwich signs are,
We don't have to approve that though.
no.
Okay. Just trying to be helpful on and trying to launch it, because I think we're excited that it's a national brand,
Yeah.
national chain. That's going to be good for the
Yeah.
For the
and
area.
That's the thing is just their distinguishing marks are all corporate standards and in that area. And that's what's unfortunate is the old owner had that area property that was
Mhm.
considered his. Now it's not. And that's something to address to the building owner also. That, if you want to buy that land and consider that part of your property, that's great. But yeah, there's nothing really we can do about it, especially with that line just shooting right straight down the street. And you've got two plats right there that aren't acceptable. So, yeah, I mean, this is very helpful, but I kind of had a feeling that any other option where that pylon sign would fit, the only option I could see is in that gourd area on the grass, but.
Can I ask you a question? Looks like Ray's gonna ask a question.
yeah, let's go with Ray. He's been trying
Yeah.
to say something
Gary,
for.
Gary's trying to say something.
Well, and then we'll go back to Gary.
So, we're going to amend the historic district code anyway. I'm wondering, I don't know where the historic district runs and how far from Commercial Street it runs back. But there may be a provision, I mean, you've got a sign that, you've got the Exxon sign there that's right there. What if we were to look at maybe amending the historic district to allow for a pole sign, as long as it was set back from Commercial Street an adequate distance, 300 feet, whatever it happens to be. that's another possibility, is that you could amend the code to actually provide for it. When you get a business back in these areas right here, this is the area behind the commercial street buildings is really gonna all be parking, pretty much. But this is the only exception to it, and that is the hotel. And I'm not sure, yeah, the hotel is, it's in that commercial district. But it may be the only building that fits into this category of being able to have a pole sign. If you were to say in the historic district, as long as you're set back 300 feet, 200 feet, whatever it happens to be, that you can have one on your property. And then, you know, we'd need to find a place for it, I guess, but it doesn't make any sense to have a hotel that far back, a destination-oriented business that far back
You gotta help out.
without a pole sign up for the freeway. It just makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
And that's just those are my personal opinions, Mr. Chair. So.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. Let's hear from Ray now.
Okay, I want to make a motion. I got some comments after you accept the motion. My motion will be we approve sign 1, 2, and 3, and that we have Gary, planner, Jake, and staff look at the code and determine what possibilities there are for other signage to happen appropriately. That's my motion. I want to discuss it.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll
on the
second that.
motion? All right, let's discuss the motion.
Okay. If I might, couple things, and just be, at least from my perception, the pole sign is what, 25 feet? If you end up with two big buildings that are 40 feet in front on those two front parts, that pole sign wouldn't be seen.
It's gonna be covered. That's fine.
Okay, and I think we want, most hotels I'm aware of need some signage. And need some directional signage. So I was really made the motion to have Jake and Gary and staff look at ordinance and code. I'm not against, I don't want to go against code, but look at ordinances and code and see what is possible to do appropriately to allow some good signage for the motel. I'd like to see that happen. So I've heard, and again, maybe my hearing's gone bad, maybe my ears are telling me. I've heard some differences of opinion between our professionals about whether it's allowed or not, premise, off premise. I've heard some differences. The other question I have, I don't know if we should take precedence. If our regular sign ordinance allows things differently than the historical overlay allows, I'm not sure which would take precedence.
Historic would.
Would take precedence over the regular sign ordinance. Okay. All right. All right. That's my motion, my discussion.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion? All right, let's vote. All in favor of the motion as outlined? And Jay, I see your hand. Teresa, that's unanimous for all present, so.
We want to be, for my opinion, we want to be supportive of motel. We want to do things so they can get the proper notification signs they want. I think Gary kind of indicated that too. So whatever we can do that's proper and appropriate and legal, I would like to see us as a city do to help with the information that the motel needs. That's where we're coming from.
I have someone not directed to that action item, but I do have a comment on the signage in general. Do you mind putting the map back up? Is that okay? Because if you think forward, we have an alleyway project coming up, okay? That road is not going to be the same road for the hotel, but it's going to go right on that parcel next to it, right? It's coming right there, right? Okay, so now you're going to be having to put signage up to direct people on how to come in and out of that place. I don't remember if that's the inlet or the outlet for there, but you're going to have to do that. So whatever signage ordinance or adjustments we want to make, and not to mention the two buildings that will go on those parcels, there will be more signage needed. And the city, being in charge of the alleyway, will need to have its own, make sure it's in compliance with those same sign ordinances. So I would say keep that in mind as we do this.
Yeah, Yeah, that's a good call out.
So you're gonna have a road coming from this down here going across that way towards the motel?
Come,
Okay,
come on, so we come in the,
yeah, we've just got that building that's right in front of it right now too.
Yeah, and the alley as planned would exit one way out onto commercial about right here where these two cars are in the,
Is that the out right there?
that's the out,
Okay.
yeah.
So the entrance is on the other side.
It's a
Turns
one-way
it-
alley, is that?
Well, actually, as conceptually designed,
may want
which is
to-
not
may
approved
want
or
to- may
construction,
want- May want to do
it-
it the other way.
it's two-way right here where we have more room. And then it switches to one-way going out right here.
One way out to Commercial Street.
Yep, one way out to commercial and then two-way.
Going
You get
to.
into
And the hotel is where it stops at two-way. So from the hotel, you can go both directions. And then from the going east, southeast, and then going north is one way. As conceptually designed, but it does work out kind of nice that way.
To Justin's point, and I guess the one on the corner of State Street, and Commercial Street, we had that one sign there in the past that we used it as a directional sign for Commercial Street properties. And I think what Justin said, we may need to allow more of those for all the businesses on that back side. So we may need to come up with a code or ordinance that we feel good with, allowing some off-premise signs. And Gary kind of mentioned that. We want to allow some under certain circumstances.
And I think having a multi-tenant sign is a great thing, something that promotes all of the businesses in the downtown. And is it electronic or is it, the main businesses pay to be on there or whatever? I mean, that's just
It'd
discussion.
definitely be off-premise.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly to do that, you're right. But maybe in a way that doesn't encumber the city in the future.
But I agree with you, Justin, that rather than considering this project as a one-off, we've got already future plans. So let's accommodate everything that's taking place.
Yeah, in addition, so like we're saying though, those monument signs, it wasn't approved. We don't do monument signs at Commercial Street. Well, a monument sign might actually be the best sign to put there for that alleyway. So it's not gonna be, I'm just,
People can see it.
yeah, you gotta, anyway. And whether
Well,
there's an
I
inlet or an
agree.
outlet there, you're gonna need to do that. So make sure that's a consideration with
I think that's
how we do it.
Well, just keep my card when that time comes.
There you go.
I think it'll just sit on those. So, I did have a question though. When will all this take place on your code changes or your modifications?
From a timing standpoint, I mean, Jake and Gary can come back with some proposals.
They meet once a month. We can bring it back in January for discussion
Okay.
and maybe even have something for you if we see something solid.
So that's what I'm kind of thinking too. If we were just going with the building signage and if there's a time frame when they.
Oh,
would
the building
relook-
sign you can move forward on.
Correct, yeah. But what I'm saying is in time, if you are considering doing some modifications to the code to allow these other tenants to have signage along there. I'm just talking about Comfort Inn, maybe in time, going with that code and the modifications that are needed, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean,
I probably see it taking several months.
Yeah.
We can talk about it next month.
right,
Then we've got to get the ordinance drafted and go through the approval process for that.
yeah, so it's just letting my client know
Yeah,
if that's it's kind of in process. is
Look,
basically-
maybe check in with me at the end of, middle of next month.
Okay.
January.
Yeah, because if you've got some foregoing plans, like a mainstream plan ahead of time, like a 5-year plan or something for this all to take
That's
place.
correct.
then Just letting them know that, it's not out of the hopper as of yet, and
Yeah,
it's-
the hotel is aware of, Ty, our city manager, has talked with the hotel about
Okay,
the downtown plans and the alley and-
good,
and all
good.
that.
So they're looking forward to it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So it's,
Just to let the planning commission know that they are planning an opening on the Comfort Inn January 1st.
Okay.
As
great.
that. I think it's still projected that way.
that's a projection per permit approval.
Yeah.
For sign
Okay.
permit approval.
And by the way, Jeff is the installer on the city sign. his company's doing the Morgan City sign.
We're actually lighting it up tomorrow, so
All right.
it's gonna look good.
Yeah.
Is it in compliance with our ordinances?
I wish it were
Okay.
bigger, to
Did we
be
get
honest.
that approved? I can't remember.
It's it's an on/off premise
Okay.
sign.
Well, on premise, it's like, it's on the city.
It looks good right now. Actually, as I was driving in, the street light illuminated it pretty good, so.
It actually is railroad property, so that is an example of an off-premise, a non-owner. But the railroad did give us authorization. And we replaced,
Very visible from the freeway, right?
Yes, yes.
This other commercial street stuff, it may take a long time. What I'd envision is maybe staff working on something that could be done now
Yeah.
for the motel, not waiting for the code change if and when and ever that alleyway goes through. That may or may not happen.
If the
Yeah.
hotel came up with something that was really appropriate, would we have the authority to approve an exception without changing the ordinance?
Good question.
If you put that wording in the ordinance, it's not, there's nothing that provides you with that. There used to be a thing called special exceptions that cities used to have, and then they took it out of the code about 15 years ago. And it was a lot like a non-conforming use, only it was a special exception you could make to the zoning ordinance when it was working a hardship on somebody. And not just a variance type hardship, but an actual hardship on a business like this. But it doesn't exist anymore. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
That might be the easiest change to make.
yeah, I would say for some of these things, it wouldn't be too hard to add a
Refine the
sign
language.
and add a link. We're just talking about some text adjustments to the code. And typically that'd be 2 meetings, a planning commission meeting, and then it goes to council, and that can happen. Council meets twice a month and planning commission once a month.
That it's working on these other markers that we can possibly get through, so.
Yeah,
Well, and like I said, I'm just waiting for word back from company and landowner too.
okay.
It's really good to know that, previously the landowner had that, because that's
Mhm.
what they needed to know also. So I don't think they knew that.
Yeah, okay. Well, they're the new owners.
All right, I think we've got direction to move forward with that piece of it. That does conclude the 2 items we had on our agenda. Are there any final comments before we adjourn for the day? All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas,
Merry
Gary,
Christmas.
Jason, Dave, thank you.
And thank you, Justin, for your service.
Sailing
John
off
is,
into the sun.
John is very subjective. Are you done?